She fell in love with her father's greatest enemy. What happened next shocked the entire Wild West. Her family had lived in the small town of Redstone for generations, and her father, Jonathan Thompson, had built a name for himself as one of the strongest and most respected ranchers in the region. The Thompson Ranch was large, with rolling pastures, a sturdy barn, and a herd of cattle that people often admired from a distance. But along with respect came enemies, and the most dangerous one was Silas McCready, a man whose family had been at odds with the Thompsons for longer than anyone could remember. From a young age, Clara understood the meaning of the word feud. She had seen her father's face harden whenever the McCready's name was mentioned. She had overheard heated arguments between men at the town saloon, witnessed the tension in the market when the two families crossed paths, and even felt the unspoken warnings in the way townspeople looked at her. Everything she knew about Silas McCready had been filtered through her father's eyes. He was sly, untrustworthy, and a threat to everything the Thompsons had worked for. Yet, Clara was not the kind of girl who blindly accepted what she was told. She was curious, adventurous, and sharp-minded. Unlike her older brothers who had embraced the hard work of the ranch and the pride of the feud, Clara spent her days exploring the hills, listening to the birds, and watching the town's life with keen eyes. She loved reading whenever she could, often sneaking into the small town library to devour stories about distant lands, brave women, and daring adventures. It was in those quiet moments, away from the harsh words of her father and the constant tension, that she allowed herself to dream about a life that could be her own, one not dictated by old grudges and endless rivalries. Clara's life took a quiet, yet powerful turn the day she first saw Luke McCready. He was different from what she had been told. Where she had expected arrogance or cruelty, she saw something else entirely. Luke had a calm, steady presence that drew people in. He was tall and lean, with a gentle smile that didn't seem forced, and eyes that seemed to look right through a person's soul, reading their thoughts and fears. Their first meeting was purely by chance. Clara had wandered down to the river that ran between the Thompson and McCready lands, a place she often visited when she needed to think or escape the strict rules of her father. She had been crouched by the water, dipping her fingers in and watching the sunlight dance on the ripples, when she heard a soft voice behind her. "Beautiful day," he had said, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. She turned slowly to see Luke standing a few feet away, hat in hand, looking as though he belonged to a world entirely separate from the feud that had defined her life. Clara wanted to be cautious. Her father's warnings rang loudly in her head, but something in Luke's calm demeanor disarmed her. They spoke briefly, at first exchanging simple words about the weather, the river, and the livestock, but the conversation soon grew longer. Clara found herself laughing at his dry humor and thoughtful observations. Luke was intelligent, curious, and kind, everything her father's stories had said he could never be. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Luke began to meet more often, always in secret. The river became their meeting place, a quiet sanctuary where the past and present could exist without the heavy weight of the feud. They shared stories of their childhood, their dreams, and their hopes for the future. Luke told Clara about his love for horses, his fascination with the stars, and how he often wished for a life where families could coexist without hatred. Clara shared her dreams of seeing the world beyond Redstone, of finding her own place where she could make decisions without fear of judgment or punishment. Every meeting brought a mixture of excitement and fear. Clara knew that if anyone discovered their secret friendship, the consequences could be severe. Town gossip traveled fast, and the Thompsons and McCreadys were watched like hawks. Yet the more time she spent with Luke, the more she realized that the man he was had nothing to do with the enemy her father described. He was honorable, brave, and thoughtful, the kind of person who could challenge her mind and her heart in ways she had never imagined. Despite the growing closeness, Clara also felt the pull of her family's legacy. She loved her father deeply, admired his strength and resilience, and respected the way he had built their life from nothing. She knew that every time she smiled at Luke or lingered in his presence, she risked shattering the bond of trust she had with her family. Nights were the hardest. Lying in her small bed, Clara would stare at the wooden beams above her, thinking about the choices ahead. Should she continue to meet Luke, risking everything, or should she obey her father and try to forget the young man who had captured her attention? Clara's father, meanwhile, was unaware of the growing connection between their families. He was preoccupied with maintaining the ranch, managing disputes with other townsfolk, and plotting ways to protect his property from McCready influence. He spoke often of pride, honor, and the dangers of trusting the wrong people. To him, Silas McCready and his family were constant reminders of the chaos that could enter a life if one let their guard down. Clara's secret meetings with Luke would have seemed a betrayal in his eyes, a dangerous weakening of the defenses he had built around his family for decades. But Clara was not deterred. The excitement of sneaking through the hills, the thrill of meeting someone who understood her, and the quiet joy of shared laughter became a force she could not resist. Every meeting strengthened her resolve and her feelings. Luke, too, began to rely on these encounters. They were more than a way to escape the feud. They were a chance to see a world that could be different, a world where respect, understanding, and perhaps even love could exist between two families who had long been enemies. The townspeople of Redstone noticed subtle changes too. The tension between the Thompsons and McCreadys seemed to pulse more strongly than ever. Neighbors whispered about stolen glances and secret rides through the hills. Children playing near the river would occasionally spot Clara and Luke talking quietly, their heads closed together as if sharing a secret that only they could understand. Rumors began to swirl, and the air in Redstone became thick with curiosity, suspicion, and anticipation. For Clara, life became a delicate balancing act. By day, she fulfilled her duties on the ranch, assisting with chores, caring for younger siblings, and attending social events where appearances mattered. By evening, she stole away to the river, meeting Luke under the fading light, feeling a freedom and happiness that had been absent from her life. Every encounter was electric, filled with unspoken promises and the subtle thrill of rebellion. As the weeks passed, Clara began to notice subtle shifts in her own heart. She realized that what she felt for Luke was more than friendship. Her admiration had blossomed into something deeper, something that frightened her as much as it exhilarated her. Loving the son of her family's greatest enemy was unthinkable, yet the heart has a way of ignoring rules and reason when it senses a connection it cannot deny. Clara's mind wrestled with the paradox, loyalty to her family versus the undeniable pull of her heart. And so, the stage was set for a story that would challenge every belief Clara had grown up with. The dusty town of Redstone, the sprawling ranches, and the bitter feud were all pieces of a puzzle that was about to be rearranged by one young woman's courage and one young man's integrity. Clara did not yet know how the coming months would test her, nor did she understand the consequences of a love that could change the course of her family's history. But in those quiet moments by the river, with Luke's hand brushing against hers and the wind carrying the scent of grass and water, Clara allowed herself to dream. She allowed herself to imagine a world where love, courage, and understanding could triumph over decades of hatred. Little did she know, those dreams would soon collide with reality in ways that would shock the entire town, challenge her loyalty, and ignite a story that would be told for years in whispers and awe. Clara's journey had begun, not as a rebellion, not as a defiance, but as the awakening of a heart brave enough to see beyond old grudges and daring enough to step into the unknown. And from that first glance by the river to the deepening bond she could not deny, Clara's life, and the lives of everyone around her, was about to be changed forever. Clara Thompson could hardly sleep those nights. Her heart was restless, her thoughts tangled between duty to her family and the strange, powerful feelings she had for Luke Macready. Each secret meeting by the river left her both thrilled and terrified. It was as if the world had suddenly grown larger, brighter, and more dangerous all at once. She knew she was breaking rules, rules her father had spent a lifetime instilling, but she could not resist the pull of something so pure and unexpected. Luke, on his part, felt the same tension. He had grown up hearing his family's side of the feud, learning to distrust the Thompsons and see them as rivals who must be watched at all times. Yet, Clara challenged every belief he had been taught. She was not like the stories he had heard of the Thompsons being cruel or cunning. She was kind, intelligent, and independent. Every time he saw her, he felt a sense of peace, a feeling he had never known existed amid the endless disputes between their families. Their meetings became a ritual. Clara would often ride her horse quietly across the hills, careful not to be seen by anyone who might recognize her, until she reached the river. Luke would usually arrive shortly after, sometimes bringing a book he had borrowed, sometimes a sketch pad, because he loved to draw the landscape of Redstone, the horses, and the people who lived in it. They shared simple moments, watching the sunset, laughing at small jokes, and telling stories about their childhoods. But beneath the light-hearted conversation, something stronger was growing, an invisible thread connecting their hearts. One late afternoon, the river sparkled gold as the sun began to set behind the hills. Clara leaned against a large rock, and Luke sat nearby, sketching the reflection of trees in the water. They were quiet for a long time, simply enjoying each other's company. Then in a low voice, Luke said, "You know, Clara, I never believed in people being different from what I was told. But meeting you, it makes me think maybe there's more to the world than I knew." Clara smiled, feeling warmth rise in her chest. "I feel the same," she admitted. "All my life, I've been told that people like you are my enemy. But every time I see you, I realize that what I was told might not be the truth." There was a long silence, filled only by the gentle ripple of the river and the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. It was a silence full of meaning. They both knew the weight of what they were doing. A friendship between them could never be ordinary. It was a dangerous bridge between two worlds that had been built on distrust for decades. And yet, in that silence, both of them felt the first flutter of something more profound. Love, fragile but undeniable. But as much as Clara enjoyed these moments, the reality of the feud could not be ignored. One day, while riding back from the river, she saw a group of townspeople gathered near the Macready ranch. Whispers carried through the wind, and she realized that the tension between the families was growing. A new dispute had arisen, a disagreement over water rights, which had always been a contentious issue in Redstone. The Macreadys claimed that a section of the river belonged to them, while the Thompsons insisted it was theirs. Arguments flared, voices were raised, and Clara knew it was only a matter of time before tempers boiled over. Despite the looming danger, Clara could not stay away from Luke. Every meeting was a mixture of excitement and fear, a dance on the edge of discovery. They spoke in whispers, sometimes hiding behind trees or crouching in the tall grass to avoid being seen. Their conversations deepened. They discussed their dreams, their fears, and the kind of life they hoped to have beyond Redstone. Clara told Luke about her longing to see mountains, oceans, and cities bustling with people she had never met. Luke shared his love for drawing and how he dreamed of becoming someone who could bridge the gap between people, someone who could make the world understand that old grudges could be healed. One evening, Clara noticed that Luke seemed quieter than usual. They were sitting on the bank of the river, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. "Is something wrong?" Clara asked softly. Luke sighed and looked away, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. "It's my father. He's planning something against your family." I don't know what exactly, but tensions are rising and I fear it will get worse soon. I don't want anyone to get hurt, Clara. Least of all you." Clara's heart sank. The reality she had tried to ignore was closing in on them. She realized that their secret friendship was not just a personal risk, it could ignite more anger between the families. "We have to be careful," she whispered, gripping his hand. "I don't want to see anyone hurt either." But despite their caution, news travels fast in a small town. Rumors began to swirl that Clara and Luke were spending a lot of time together. Friends whispered to friends, and soon, even people who had no connection to the feud were talking. Some disapproved, believing that any interaction between the families was dangerous. Others were simply curious, fascinated by the audacity of two young people defying generations of anger. Clara and Luke knew they were walking a tightrope. Every meeting could be the last if their families discovered the truth. One day, as Clara returned from helping her father in the barn, she found Luke waiting at the edge of the property. His eyes were anxious, but there was determination there as well. "Clara, we can't keep meeting like this," he said. "It's too risky. If anyone finds out, it could ruin everything." Clara felt a pang of disappointment. "I know," she replied, her voice soft, "but I don't want to stop seeing you. I feel something I've never felt before. Something worth the risk." Luke looked at her, and for a moment the world around them seemed to pause. "I feel the same," he said, "but we have to be smart. Maybe we can find a way to protect ourselves, to be together without making things worse." From that day, they became more careful. They met at hidden spots farther from town, under the cover of trees or near abandoned barns that no one visited. They developed signals, subtle gestures to indicate when it was safe to approach or when danger was near. Every meeting was a test of courage and trust, a secret rebellion against the rules that had defined their lives. Their friendship continued to blossom into something more profound. Clara realized that she was falling in love with Luke, though she had never spoken the words aloud. Each time he laughed, each time he held her hand or shared a quiet story, her heart swelled with emotions she could no longer ignore. Luke felt the same, his heart opening in ways he had never imagined. He admired Clara's bravery, intelligence, and independence. She challenged him to think differently, to question the boundaries that had been imposed upon them since birth. Yet the feud was never far from their minds. Every time Clara heard the distant shouts from the McCready ranch or saw her father's stern expression, she was reminded of the fragile nature of their happiness. They both knew that their love, or even the appearance of closeness, could spark disaster. It was a love that existed in the shadows, but it was also a love that gave them hope, a belief that perhaps, somehow, they could change the course of their family's history. One afternoon, as they sat on a hill overlooking the town, Clara leaned her head on Luke's shoulder. "Do you think it's possible for our families to ever get along?" she asked quietly. Luke thought for a moment, staring at the distant horizon. "I want to believe it is," he said. "I think if people like us, people who understand both sides, try hard enough, maybe we can make a difference. Maybe we can show them that love and understanding are stronger than hate." Clara smiled, feeling a spark of hope. "Then we have to try," she said. "Even if it's hard, even if it's dangerous." And so, they made a silent promise to each other. They would continue to meet, continue to nurture their bond, and continue to dream of a world where their families' feud could be healed. Every shared smile, every whispered conversation, every secret glance was a step toward a future that seemed impossible but was worth fighting for. Unbeknownst to them, the town had already started to notice their closeness. Whispers turned into speculation, and speculation began to reach the ears of their parents. Clara's father, already suspicious of the McCready's intentions, began to pay closer attention to his daughter's movements. Luke's father, meanwhile, sensed a change in his son, though he could not yet understand the depth of it. The stage was set for conflict, confrontation and choices that would test Clara and Luke in ways they had never imagined. But in the quiet moments by the river, under the fading light of the sunset, Clara and Luke found solace in each other. They had discovered something rare and precious: trust, companionship, and the first stirrings of love. And though danger lurked close by, and the feud threatened to engulf them at any moment, they felt alive, inspired, and determined. For the first time, they believed that perhaps, just perhaps, love could be stronger than hate. And so their secret continued, fragile yet unbreakable, as the days of the Wild West stretched ahead, filled with promise, tension, and the unspoken question: could two hearts against all odds change the course of history? The feud between the Thompsons and the McCreadys had always been part of life in Redstone, but over the weeks, it began to grow in intensity. Small disagreements over land and water had been ignored before, but now every argument seemed larger, sharper, and more dangerous. The town felt tense, as if the very air had grown thick with unspoken threats. Clara Thompson, despite her growing love for Luke McCready, could not ignore the reality around her. She could feel it in her chest: the unease, the whispers, the looks of disapproval from neighbors who were always watching. One afternoon, while Clara helped her father tend to the cattle, a rider arrived from the McCready ranch. He brought news that a group of McCready hands had crossed into Thompson land, claiming it was their grazing territory. Jonathan Thompson's face darkened with anger, and his voice grew sharp as he called for his sons to prepare for a confrontation. Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew that this escalation could not end well, and she worried for Luke, who was undoubtedly aware of the same dispute from his own side. The tension in town grew as both families prepared for what many feared could turn violent. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers watched from a distance, unsure whether the conflict would remain words or escalate to something worse. Clara found herself caught between loyalty to her father and loyalty to her heart. Every glance at Luke, every memory of their secret meetings made her chest ache. She wished she could step out of the feud entirely, but the reality of her world refused to allow it. Meanwhile, Luke struggled with his own emotions. He had grown up learning to defend his family's honor, but he could not help but care deeply for Clara. The thought that she could be caught in the middle of the feud terrified him. He spent hours thinking of ways to prevent bloodshed, to calm tempers, and to protect both families from harm. Yet, the weight of generations of anger and pride made it almost impossible to find peace. Every move seemed risky, and every word could spark disaster. Despite the growing danger, Clara and Luke continued to meet in secret. Each encounter carried a heightened sense of urgency. They spoke softly, avoiding loud laughter or sudden movements that might give away their location. Clara felt her heart race each time she approached the river, wondering if her father had noticed her absence or if someone from town had seen her ride away. Luke, equally cautious, made sure to scout the area before Clara arrived, ensuring that their meetings remained hidden from prying eyes. One evening, as they sat together under the fading light, Clara voiced the fear that had been growing in her heart. "Luke, I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "If our families find out about us, I don't know what might happen. I don't want anyone to get hurt, and I don't want to lose you either." Luke took her hand, holding it tightly. "I'm scared too," he said quietly. "But we can't let fear control us. We have to be careful, yes, but we also have to trust that we can find a way through this. I care about you, Clara, more than I've ever cared about anything in my life. And I'll do whatever I can to protect you, even if it means putting myself at risk." Clara felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She knew their love was real, but the feud cast a long shadow over every moment of happiness. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed their conversation over and over. Her mind was a storm of thoughts. How could she continue to meet Luke? How could she honor her father's expectations? And how could she possibly find a way to stop the feud that had defined her life? The next day, tensions reached a breaking point. Jonathan Thompson, furious at the perceived intrusion of the McCreadys, organized a small group of men to confront them. Clara watched from a distance, her heart pounding as she saw her father and the others approach the McCready property. Luke, seeing the Thompsons advancing, gathered his own men, ready to defend his family. The air between the two groups was electric, filled with anger, fear, and anticipation. It seemed that the feud was about to explode into violence. Clara felt torn, caught between two worlds. She wanted to run to Luke to stop the confrontation, to speak for peace, but she knew that stepping forward could make matters worse. Instead, she climbed a hill overlooking the scene, hoping to think of a way to prevent disaster. Her heart ached as she watched the men argue, raise their voices, and prepare for the worst. She realized that this feud had grown beyond simple disputes over land or cattle. It had become a battle of pride, honor, and long-held grudges. In that tense moment, Clara made a decision. She could no longer remain a passive observer. She had to act, even if it meant defying her father. Gathering her courage, she rowed down to the river where Luke often met her. She needed him to understand what was happening, to find a way to stop the conflict before it escalated further. Her hands shook as she approached, but when she saw Luke waiting, her fear mixed with determination. "Luke," she said urgently, "our families, they're about to fight. We have to do something. We can't let this continue. Someone could get hurt or worse." Luke nodded, his jaw tight with concern. "I know," he said. "I've been thinking of ways to stop it, but it's hard. The men are angry and their pride won't allow them to back down easily. But maybe if we speak to them together, they'll listen." Clara hesitated. "Together? Do you mean go to our fathers?" "Yes," Luke said firmly. "We can't do this alone, but if they see that we are united, maybe they'll reconsider. Maybe they'll realize that this feud is tearing both families apart and that there is a better way." It was a bold idea, almost reckless, but Clara felt a surge of hope. "Then let's do it," she said, "for both our families and for ourselves." That evening, they rode together to the edge of their families' properties, where the men had gathered, still tense and ready for confrontation. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she dismounted, Luke following close behind. The sight of the two young people standing side by side shocked everyone. The men froze, unsure what to make of this unexpected intervention. Clara took a deep breath. "Father, Luke's father," she began, her voice steady despite the fear inside her. "We've been living with this feud for too long. It's hurt too many people, and it doesn't have to continue. We care about each other, and we believe that we can find a way to live without anger and hatred between our families." The silence that followed was heavy. Jonathan Thompson's face was red with anger and disbelief. "Clara, what are you saying?" he demanded. "I'm saying," Clara continued, her eyes fixed on her father, "that we have a choice. We can continue this feud and more people will get hurt, or we can try to end it. I don't want to fight anymore. And I believe Luke doesn't either." Luke stepped forward, adding his voice. "We want peace," he said. "We don't want to fight. We want to show that even though our families have been enemies for a long time, it's possible to change, to forgive, and to live in a better way." For a long moment, neither side spoke. The tension was palpable, and the air seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, Jonathan Thompson lowered his gaze, as if struggling to process his daughter's words. Silas McCready, who had been watching silently, nodded slightly, acknowledging the courage it took for both young people to speak. It was not a resolution, far from it, but it was a start. The men began to speak more calmly, the anger in their voices softening as they realized that their children were united in a way that demanded attention. They could see the determination in Clara and Luke's eyes, the sincerity of their desire for peace. For the first time in many years, the possibility of reconciliation entered the minds of both families. As Clara and Luke watched the men begin to talk, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washed over them. They had taken a risk, one that could have ended disastrously, but it had also planted a seed of hope. They knew that the path ahead would be difficult, that pride and old wounds would not be healed overnight. But for the first time, they felt that change was possible. That night, as they rode back to their respective homes, they spoke little, each lost in their thoughts. Clara felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She realized that love was not just about happiness. It was about courage, about standing up for what you believed in, even when it was hard, even when it seemed impossible. Luke felt the same. He had discovered that true strength was not measured by power or skill in a fight, but by the ability to stand for something greater than oneself. And so, as the sun set over Redstone, painting the sky with gold and crimson, the feud had escalated to its highest point yet, but the hearts of two young people held a promise of change. Clara and Luke knew that challenges lay ahead, that suspicion and anger would not disappear easily, and that the town would watch their every move. Yet, they also knew that for the first time, the future was not entirely dictated by the past. The battle lines had been drawn, the tension was higher than ever, and the town braced for what was to come. But amid the fear and uncertainty, Clara and Luke's bond grew stronger. They had faced the storm together, and in doing so, they had discovered the power of courage, love, and hope. The feud was far from over, but now there was a chance, a small, fragile, but undeniable chance, for peace. Clara Thompson could hardly believe what had happened earlier that day. She had stood before her father, her heart pounding, and told him what she felt, what she believed, and what she hoped for. Her voice had been steady, but inside she had been shaking with fear. She had defied not just her father's orders, but decades of family tradition, challenging the rules that had shaped her life since she was a child. For the first time, she had risked everything for something she believed in, not money, not status, not even safety, but love and the chance for peace. Her father, Jonathan Thompson, had been stunned. Clara had never spoken to him this way before, never shown such determination. For years, he had been used to obedience, to his children following his instructions without question. But now, his daughter was standing firm, looking him in the eye, refusing to back down. The room had grown silent, the air heavy with tension. Every word Clara had spoken had been a challenge, a plea, and a declaration all at once. "Father," she had said, her voice strong despite the tremor in her hands, "I love Luke, and I believe that this feud is tearing our families apart. I cannot stand by and do nothing. We have a choice. We can continue the hatred or we can try to end it. Please listen to me. Please trust me." Her father had been angry at first, his face red, his hands clenched into fists. "Clara," he had growled, "do you have any idea what you are saying? Luke McCready is the son of a man who has been my greatest enemy for years. Do you think you can just ignore that? Do you think love can erase everything that has happened?" Clara had taken a deep breath, steadying herself. "I don't know if love can erase the past," she had admitted, "but it can change the future, and I want to help change it, not just for us but for both our families. I cannot live my life hating someone because of old grudges. I refuse to do that." Jonathan Thompson had stared at her for a long time, the lines of worry and anger etched deep into his face. The room had grown still, as if the walls themselves were waiting for his response. He had never expected his daughter to have such courage, to speak so openly, and to challenge him so directly. And yet, beneath the anger, there was a flicker of something else, pride, perhaps, or the realization that Clara's words carried truth. Meanwhile, Luke McCready was having a similar struggle with his own family. When he had told his father and Silas McCready about the plan to speak to both families together, he had been met with disbelief and anger. "You want to talk to the Thompsons? After everything? Do you think they will listen? Do you think they will just forgive us because you ask nicely?" his father had demanded. "I have to try," Luke had replied firmly. "This feud has gone on for too long. We cannot keep living like this. Clara and I, we care about each other, and we believe that there is a way to end this. But we need to act. We cannot wait for someone else to make peace for us." His father had shaken his head, skeptical and frustrated, but Luke's determination had been unwavering. He had convinced the elders to allow him to meet Clara and speak to the Thompsons, if only as a first step. It was a risky plan, one that could easily backfire, but Luke knew that it was worth the risk if it could prevent further conflict. The day of the meeting arrived, and tension filled the air. Clara and Luke had chosen a neutral spot, a clearing between the two ranches, where neither family had the advantage. They had agreed to speak honestly and openly, hoping that their courage could inspire their families to listen. Clara had been nervous, her hands trembling as she approached the gathering. Luke had been at her side, offering quiet reassurance, and together they had faced the crowd of wary, skeptical faces. Clara had taken a deep breath and stepped forward. "We are here because we care," she began, her voice carrying across the clearing. "We care about our families and we care about the future. We know that there has been anger and hurt for many years, but we also know that there is a better way, a way that does not involve fighting, hatred, or fear. We want to help our families find that way." Luke had added, his voice calm but firm, "We are not asking for forgiveness immediately. We are asking for a chance to show that peace is possible, that our families can move forward without destroying each other. We know it will be hard, and we know it will take time. But we believe it is possible if we try together." For a moment there was silence. The two families stared at each other, their faces a mixture of anger, suspicion, and surprise. No one had expected this. No one had thought that love could be used as a bridge rather than a weapon. Clara felt her heart race as she waited, hoping that her words had reached their hearts, hoping that her courage had not been in vain. Then, slowly, a change began. Jonathan Thompson lowered his gaze, considering his daughter's words. Silas McCready's eyes softened, a sign that he, too, was reflecting on the possibility of peace. The elders of both families began to murmur among themselves, weighing the risk and the promise of a future without constant conflict. The moment was fragile, delicate, but it carried the seed of hope. Clara could feel it in her chest, a sense of triumph mixed with fear. She had risked everything, defied her father, and faced the anger of a town used to hatred and revenge. Yet, standing there beside Luke, she felt a strength she had never known before. This was more than love. It was courage, determination, and the belief that one person could make a difference. As the discussion continued, some members of the families began to speak cautiously, suggesting ways that disputes could be resolved without violence. Water rights, cattle grazing, and property boundaries were discussed with careful attention, each suggestion a small step toward compromise. Clara and Luke listened, offering ideas and encouragement, but allowing the elders to lead. It was a delicate balance. Too much interference could backfire, but too little could leave old grudges unresolved. By the end of the day, the first tentative agreements had been made. Both families had agreed to hold off on any aggressive actions, to respect each other's property, and to meet regularly to resolve conflicts peacefully. It was not a complete resolution, far from it, but it was a start. And for Clara and Luke, it felt like a victory of the heart, a proof that love and courage could spark change even in the harsh, unforgiving world of the Wild West. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Clara and Luke rode back together, exhausted but exhilarated. They spoke little, each lost in thought, reflecting on the day's events. The danger was not gone, the feud was not over, but they had taken the first step toward a new future. And in that shared silence, they found comfort in each other's presence, knowing that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they reached the edge of their properties, Clara turned to Luke, a mixture of relief and determination in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it, but I know this is just the beginning. We have a long way to go." Luke smiled, taking her hand. "I know," he said, "but we will face it together. No matter what happens, we have each other and we have the chance to change things. That's worth everything." And so, as night fell over Redstone, the town that had been divided by anger, fear, and old grudges began to feel a shift in the air. People whispered about the courage of two young people, amazed that love had dared to challenge hatred and pride. Some were skeptical, some hopeful, but all recognized that something extraordinary had taken place. Clara and Luke had not only defied their families, they had sparked a movement toward reconciliation, proving that even in the most hostile environments, courage and love could make a difference. Clara returned home that night, exhausted but filled with purpose. She had faced her father, defied tradition, and spoken for peace, and she had not been alone. Luke had stood by her side, a partner in courage and love, ready to face whatever obstacles came next. She knew that challenges lay ahead, skeptical family members, lingering anger, and the long shadow of the feud. But for the first time she felt hope. True hope, born of action, bravery, and the belief that one person, guided by love, could make a difference. And so, as the stars began to twinkle over the quiet town, Clara Thompson understood that life would never be the same. The bold choice she had made that day, choosing love and courage over fear and obedience, had changed the course of her life, and perhaps the lives of everyone around her. The Wild West was full of danger, conflict, and unpredictability, but it was also a place where hearts could be brave, where change was possible, and where the courage of two young people could inspire an entire town. The days following Clara Thompson's bold declaration and the first tentative steps toward peace were tense and full of anticipation. Redstone had never seen anything like it. The town was buzzing with curiosity, and every neighbor, friend, and stranger seemed to be waiting for the next development. Everyone wanted to know if the Thompsons and McCreadys could truly put aside decades of anger, suspicion, and pride. Clara herself could feel the weight of expectation pressing on her shoulders, yet she carried it with a sense of purpose she had never known before. She had spoken her truth, stood by the man she loved, and challenged the tradition of hatred that had long governed their lives. Now, the outcome rested not just in her hands, but in the willingness of others to change. Luke McCready shared the same mixture of hope and anxiety. He had grown up in a family that valued honor above all else, and yet he had discovered that honor could also mean making the hard choice to forgive, to take a risk for something better. Standing by Clara's side, he felt a bond stronger than any rivalry, stronger than fear, stronger than the feud itself. But he also knew that peace would not come easily. Pride was a powerful force, and both families had it in abundance. Even with their determination, Luke and Clara understood that hearts hardened by years of anger do not soften overnight. The first few days were cautious. Members of the two families avoided direct conflict, giving the young couple space to mediate and communicate. Clara and Luke met in secret and in public, gently encouraging conversations between their parents and elders. They reminded everyone of the possibility of compromise and mutual respect. Slowly, tension in the town began to ease, though suspicion lingered. Old grudges died hard, and every step toward peace was met with small resistance. But Clara and Luke's determination never wavered. They knew that their love had sparked something larger than themselves, a possibility that the town had never dared to imagine. One afternoon, a council meeting of sorts was called at the center of the town. Clara, Luke, and the elders from both families gathered to discuss a long-standing dispute over grazing land that had caused much of the friction over the years. Jonathan Thompson and Silas McCready sat at opposite ends, their faces set in grim expressions, but both listened quietly as their children spoke. Clara took a deep breath before addressing the group. "This land," she began, "has caused so much anger and pain. But it doesn't have to. We can work together to make sure everyone gets what they need without fighting. We can respect each other's families and properties, and we can find solutions that are fair." Luke stepped forward, his voice steady. "We've been living with this feud for too long. It has hurt more people than we can count. But it doesn't have to continue. If we are brave enough to forgive and to compromise, we can build a future that is better for everyone. Not just for us, but for the children and grandchildren of our families." The room was silent again, this time with a different energy. Instead of tension, there was curiosity, the beginning of understanding. The elders spoke cautiously, weighing the words of their children, recognizing the courage and wisdom in their message. They debated, proposed compromises, and slowly, agreements began to form. Small victories were achieved: shared use of pastures, joint maintenance of water resources, and promises to avoid aggression. The process was not instant, and it was not without arguments, but it was progress. Clara felt a sense of relief, but she also knew the true challenge had only begun. Old habits die hard, and the memories of past betrayals still lingered in the minds of both families. She and Luke would have to continue to work tirelessly, demonstrating through actions and words that reconciliation was possible. Every day brought new tests, misunderstandings, moments of doubt, and subtle reminders that the past could return at any moment. Yet each day also brought hope, strengthened by the small signs of cooperation, gestures of goodwill, and the realization that their efforts were making a real difference. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Clara and Luke walked along the river where they had first met. The gentle flow of water and the soft chirping of birds made the moment feel almost magical. They spoke quietly, sharing their thoughts and dreams for the future, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "We've come a long way," Clara said softly, squeezing Luke's hand. "I never thought this could be possible. I mean the feud, the hatred, it felt like it would never end. And yet here we are, people are listening, they are beginning to see things differently." Luke smiled, a warmth spreading across his face. "It's not just what we've done," he replied. "It's you, Clara. Your courage, your honesty, your willingness to stand up for what you believe in, it has inspired everyone, even our parents, even the elders. You've shown them that change is possible." Clara felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but she also knew he was right. The work they had done together had begun to transform their world. And as she looked at Luke, she realized that their love had not only brought them closer, but had also become a force for good, capable of healing wounds that had lasted decades. But the town of Redstone had not forgotten the history of anger and rivalry that had defined it. Rumors spread quickly, some doubting the sincerity of the family's attempts at peace, others quietly supporting the change. Clara and Luke understood that their actions would continue to be watched, judged, and tested. Every decision they made, every gesture of cooperation, had the potential to strengthen or weaken the fragile trust that had been built. Then came the moment that would truly test the families. A sudden crisis arose when a fire broke out near the border of the Thompson and McCready lands. The dry grass and wooden structures caught easily, and the flames threatened to spread quickly. Both families rushed to help, putting aside old grudges to save their property, their animals, and each other. Clara and Luke worked tirelessly side by side, coordinating efforts and offering encouragement. The fire became a test of unity, a real demonstration that cooperation and trust could overcome fear and suspicion. By the time the fire was under control, something remarkable had happened. Both families had seen each other in action, helping without hesitation, risking their lives to protect neighbors they had once considered enemies. The shared experience created bonds that words alone could never have achieved. Pride and anger began to give way to respect and understanding. For the first time in decades, the Thompsons and McCreadys realized that they were stronger together than apart. The following weeks were filled with quiet celebrations, shared meals, and small acts of friendship. Clara and Luke's love became a symbol of reconciliation, a story that people in Redstone told with awe and admiration. Children played together across former boundaries, neighbors shared resources without fear, and the town felt the first true sense of community it had known in years. The feud, while not entirely erased, had lost its power to divide. Clara's father, Jonathan Thompson, finally approached her one evening as she sat by the river. His expression was softer than she had ever seen. "Clara," he said, "you were right. You and Luke, you have changed things. I can see now that love and courage can be stronger than anger. I am proud of you, even if it took me some time to understand." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Father," she whispered. "I only wanted to do what was right, for our families, for everyone." Luke's father, Silas McCready, had similar words for his son. "Luke, I underestimated you," he admitted. "Your determination, your willingness to stand for what you believe in, it has shown me a new way. You and Clara have done something remarkable. I am proud of both of you." As the sun set over Redstone, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Clara and Luke stood together, hand in hand. Their journey had been dangerous, uncertain, and full of challenges, but it had led them to this moment. They had not only found each other, but had also changed the lives of everyone around them. Love, courage, and determination had transformed the Wild West town, proving that even the deepest wounds could be healed when hearts were brave enough to try. In the days and months that followed, Clara and Luke continued to nurture the fragile peace. They organized gatherings, helped mediate disputes, and encouraged communication between the families. Their love, once secret and forbidden, became a beacon of hope and a reminder that even in the harshest environments, people could choose compassion over conflict. And though scars of the past remained, Redstone was never the same again. The story of Clara Thompson and Luke McCready, two young people who dared to love in the face of hatred, became a legend told and retold in the town. It was a story of courage, of daring to defy tradition, and of believing that love could indeed change hearts and communities. For Clara and Luke, the journey was just beginning, but they faced it together, stronger and braver than ever, knowing that love had the power not only to unite two hearts, but to transform an entire town, shocking the Wild West in a way no one would ever forget.